which is a very small thing to say. Like, I mean, people have said so many things about me at this point, but at the time I was really offended. I was like, this guy hung out with me the whole time and he thought my boots were dorky and he didn't say something.
I tend to lean a little forward, so don't feel like you have to.
Don't feel like I have to. Don't start mirroring.
Yeah. All right. First of all, great to see you, Matt. This is your first time on Skip Intro, but hopefully not your last.
Hopefully not my last.
I'm so excited to be here in the New York studio with you and catching you here while you're promoting The Rip, which I will say I loved.
Great.
But
that helps.
Yeah, that helps, right? But we're going to get to that in a second. I first want to kind of take you back a little bit because both Matt and Ben, as we used to say, Matt and Ben. Also, I'm curious, why is it always Matt and Ben and not Ben and Matt?
Maybe it rolls off the tongue better, but I hear plenty Ben and Matt.
You do? You do? Okay.
Especially now that he's the CEO of our studio. Right. Usually, his name usually goes first.
Yeah, fair enough. But I remember when Matt and Ben were everything, right? And it was kind of this changing of the guard for our generation, let's say, of coming up, these new, fresh talent. It was so exciting. And particularly when you guys won the Oscar for Good Will Hunting for the screenplay. I had just moved from New York to LA with Vanity Fair, and I remember we were a big Oscar party, and I remember the moment so clearly when you guys walked in. You were with Patrick Weitzel. I'm scrambling to get a photographer. We have that great shot of you, just like pure joy. But for you, what do you remember about that time in your life?
It was very tumultuous in a good way, but there was so much change in my life happening, and it happened really fast. That experience was just completely surreal. You know, the year before, we were actually shooting Good Will Hunting. We had a place in Toronto, like an apartment that we rented, you know, near the sound stages, and Gus came over, the director, and we watched, you know, and Cole Hauser and Casey, and you know. We just sat there and watched the Oscars like we always did, and we used to have the little sheets where you take bets and do like who gets the most awards right, and we were doing that, and I remember Robin, he was in his I think hotel, and Gus talked to him at one point and hung up and said Robin is calling Billy Crystal backstage and pitching jokes during the show, and we thought that was the coolest thing, that like Robin like would have an idea and he'd just call Billy and be like, oh, try this, you know. And we went from that kind of more normal experience of just sitting in your living room and watching to the next year being in the front row and Billy Crystal sang a song to us. It was just it was too much to metabolize. Like it was too much, too many kind of new images for our brains. It did feel like an overnight thing because that broadcast, that was the year of Titanic. And so it's still the most watched Academy Awards ever. Because of that movie, there was so much interest. Titanic was nominated for 675 Academy Awards, and and everybody wanted to see, you know, it felt like everyone was going to the movies and was kind of invested in that year. And so the experience of getting the award on a television show that everybody was watching, and then along with all the magazine, that whole magazine culture back there was so huge, and it felt like we were on the cover of every single magazine.
Yeah. Obviously, I was at Vanity Fair at the time. I have a little surprise for you.
Oh my God.
Remember when we made you put a toothbrush in your mouth?
I do.
In a bathtub?
I do. I didn't think twice. You know, there were so many pictures that day, and I don't think I'd ever done a photo shoot. So they were like, get in the bathtub. And I was like, sure.
I remember you saying, like, you were on some talk show, and you're like, oh, now no one recognizes me unless I have a toothbrush in my mouth.
David Camp, you know what's funny? I still remember that David Camp wrote something about me wearing dorky boots. And nobody had ever kind of, which is a very small thing to say. Like, I mean, people have said so many things about me at this point. But at the time, I was really offended. I was like, this guy hung out with me the whole time, and he thought my boots were dorky. And he didn't say something. I'm sure they were dorky, whatever what that means, you know.
All right. So, Oscar or Red Sox 2004 World Series champs? Which one was more important for you?
Well, I mean, the Oscar obviously was more important for my career, but it almost seems silly in retrospect for, you know, like my nephews who grew up in Boston and, you know, they've had so many championship sports teams, but in my childhood, my grandfather lived and died and never saw the Red Sox win. So there was this sense that it couldn't happen, that there really was a curse, that there really was, there was this sense that it was the Cubs and the Red Sox, and we would say, the good thing about being a Cubs fan is that they never even get close, right? But the Red Sox just break your heart, in so many ways. And it started when, in 1978 when I was, 75, I was 5 years old. I was kind of too young to really understand. But 78, and then 86, which was the Mets, and that was a huge thing. And so I really did have, in retrospect, but I wasn't embarrassed at all about it at the time. I do think it changed all of our psyches, and actually the psyche of the city in like a meaningful way.
There is something about just the sports fan in Boston to me that is just like none other, which also kind of pisses me off because you had such a run with Tom Brady and your Pats, and you know what? You could sit a couple out, and it's way too quick you've bounced back, because I'm a Broncos fan, and it's been a while.
We're sitting in a good place. It's just a great organization.
Why is that?
Robert Kraft is an amazing owner, and the fact that they were able to turn this around so quickly is amazing. And we've got, I wouldn't trade our coach for anybody, and we've got an amazing young quarterback again. So we'll see what happens. I mean, the Boston sports fan thing, I used to be very defensive of my fellow Boston sports fans, but I understand now after the last 20 years how people are like, guys, you don't get to be obnoxious anymore. Yeah. It's hard. We have to go from being a perennial kind of loser with a chip on our shoulder to like the team where you go like, okay, let's be a little classy about this now.
So your legacy a little bit here is kind of amazing. You have over 100 acting credits, right? I'm waiting for the next Jason Bourne. That's just personally, I love that franchise. I think it's amazing.
I do too. The issue is just finding a story that is worthy of kind of saddling back up and doing. I mean, we all love it, but we made them all as one-offs, kind of. It wasn't planned as a trilogy, even though the books were a trilogy. Tony Gilroy's script took the premise of the book and then just departed completely, and he just did his own thing, which was great and was the right movie to make. I signed up for one. I didn't sign up for three. I signed up for one, and there was always this kind of talk around, well, should we plan for the next one? And for all of us making it, we were always like, no, we should get this one right, and then we're going to worry about the next one. And so we probably didn't set ourselves up for a long run. But it was never intended to be a James Bond like evergreen where you could even switch out the character and just send them on. Each one is a different bad guy, a different mission, a different thing. It was the development of a character over time.
So good.
So it's not built to be James Bond in a way.
But it's good, and I feel like I'm going to will it that you could crack it.
I hope so. It's a tough one. I mean, because, the central conceit is amnesia. He's trying to get his memory back, and the first three movies, I kind of get my memory back 3 times. It's like I get it back in the first
one. A little bit.
And I think each movie I go, I remember everything, and then the next one I go, oh, there's that I didn't remember, but now I do, and now, And so we were kind of running out of road.
Yeah. Well, obviously you have Chris Nolan's Odyssey coming out later, but I think of some of my favorites, The Departed, Talented Mr. Ripley, The Martian. It's kind of incredible to think about. For you, do you remember, and I want to relate this back to Ben, because you and Ben were kids when you met. Is there an identifying film that you guys bonded over when you were younger?
Tons of them. Oh, we used to go to the movies every weekend. Yeah. I mean, it was all we wanted to do, and it was our, we bonded over actors, actors we loved. We did high school theater together, and we had an amazing theater teacher, who changed our lives, changed a lot of people's lives. He was one of those incredible teachers that you just hope that your kid has, but changed the way we approach work and really taught us how to write. He was an English teacher as well, but taught us how to write. He would do a play each year. We'd do crazy stuff like, Shushingura, the 47 Samurai, and like a kabuki play. But then he'd have one where the kids would write it, and he'd essentially oversee that process kind of through improvisation. And it's essentially the same technique that Ben and I use to write still. We talked about it now, like when our kids got to kind of the age of like 14, we realized that was the age we were going to New York from Boston and auditioning for things. And we'd always go together and either take the Pan Am shuttle, which was like $40, or the Eastern shuttle, and one left on the half hour. The Pan Am was on the half hour, the Eastern was on the hour, and go to New York and go to wherever this audition was, get rejected 5 minutes and turn around and go all the way back. And that was a real kind of bonding factor in our friendship, because it was a very real dream and a real obsession of ours, and we fed off each other in that way, and we didn't feel like we were too young to be doing that.
It's kind of an incredible origin story. I mean, it's amazing to hear about. I mean, teachers are all, like, we can all remember teachers that had a profound effect on us, but that feels very sophisticated for high school, right? Like teaching kids in theater. Now when people say theater, it's like I try to get my kids into theater. Like, just do it. Like, you don't really understand Shakespeare until you try to say it out loud,
Right.
Obviously, it falls on deaf ears. But to me, that experience, and I did that as a kid in high school, I got a lot out of understanding just humanity and the world at large through plays and things like that. But it's amazing to hear that. And also, you guys are so young. One, your parents are like, yeah, get on the plane, go to New York, and come back. But
they
I guess
were
it was the
great.
two of
I mean,
you.
they didn't encourage it, but they didn't stop us either. I remember my parents said, explicitly to me, like, we really hope you don't get a job as a professional. Like, we want you to go to college. We want you to finish high school, go to college. And they were right. I'm glad that I didn't get anything until I was in college. The route that I was going was, well, I have to get to the Yale School of Drama. That's where Meryl Streep went. That's where or Juilliard. I need to get to one of these places, and the best chance I'll have is going to an Ivy League school. I told myself this. I don't know why, but I wasn't a great student. But when I was about 15, I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I was a sophomore, and I just became a straight A student. And it was just, I brute forced it. I just worked really hard to get good grades. And so that's basically what I did. I did homework and I did theater, and I was very kind of single-minded about it.
Now you're on the other side of 50, right?
Sure am.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Is there any advice you wish someone had given you?
I don't think so. I think I got really good kind of counsel and worked with great people. Older actors were always really forthcoming and generous with, not only the example of how they did their job, but it's a trade, so there's a lot of mentoring that goes on. I think I got a lot of help, through those experiences, and just worked with some wonderful people. Even after the movie School Ties, which was a feature, the next one I got was Geronimo, which, that movie had Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall in it, which, two of my absolute kind of, like North Star actors and then the lead was Jason Patric, who had a great effect on me, like an incredibly serious, very disciplined, very hardworking person who, and then that really, at a critical time in my own kind of development as a person and as an actor. And so I was around people who I really admired and whose work I really liked and whose approach I really liked. But I went from there to going back to LA. That's when I dropped out. I'm like, okay, I'm done with. I didn't drop out. I'm on an extended leave of absence.
Extended.
So Ben and I were living in LA, and we had already started writing Good Will Hunting. Ben and I were faxing each other pages because we were, I think, cognizant of the fact that a great role wasn't going to just fall out of the sky. And one of the really hard parts about being an actor is it's reactive, right? You're at the mercy of the roles that are available to you. And, I heard Josh Brolin say recently in an interview that, people had come up to him and go, you've become a really great actor. And he's like, I was the same actor. I was just in kind of a C movie versus now I'm in the A movies. And you're really at the mercy of what's available to you. And that was a real impetus for Ben and I to write our own thing, because we just knew it was actually the movie Primal Fear that was kind of our epiphany, because that part, for some reason, became available. I don't know how it kicked down through all the name young actors, but it did, and it was a great role. And it just got kicked down to the jackals, right? And so now all of us had a chance. And I mean, I got a dialect coach with money I barely had. I really worked hard on this audition. And Edward Norton got it.
Yeah, no, I remember it very, very well. They were casting. It was like this unknown, who is this Edward Norton?
And we
he had
knew-
come from Yale, but just not even drama school, I think just regular
No, just
Yale.
undergrad. Yeah,
just
yeah.
undergrad.
And he won the part. He beat everybody out. Like, I mean, and he was terrific in the movie. He was great. You know what I mean? And that was when Ben and I went, well, we got to just write this thing. Like, that's the only way we're going to get good roles.
Yeah, and you got Robin Williams' Oscar, which is kind of amazing. Just a little bittersweet there. He's brilliant in the film.
He was brilliant in the film and got the film greenlit. And yeah, there's a lot you could say about him. He amazing. Amazing experience, and we were really lucky to have that in my memory bank. Had a profound effect on both of us. And yeah, I was really, really lucky. I worked, I did Courage Under Fire with Denzel and Meg Ryan. I worked with Tom Hanks on Saving Private Ryan and Robin. With Coppola, with The Rainmaker. This is all before Good Will Hunting comes out. There's a very weird transition where you go from wondering if you can pay your bills to somebody offering you $1 million, and you can't imagine turning down $1 million for anything, right? So to say, you know what I mean? It's a very, so I don't begrudge anybody, especially when they're starting out. I remember we had finished Good Will Hunting. I got the job in Saving Private Ryan. By the way, I got that job because of Robin. Because Steven was shooting Amistad, and he was shooting at the Capitol, at the State House, and we were across the park rehearsing Good Will Hunting in a hotel, and Robin, at the end of rehearsal, we're sitting there, and Robin and his wife, he goes, "You guys want to go meet Steve?" And we instantly knew who he was talking about, and we were like, "Yes, please." And he walked us across the park and went and visited with Steven, and we were standing kind of in the background, and Steven, came over to, "These are the guys I'm working with, Steven." And he kind of shook our hands, and then he kind of paused with me, and he goes, "I know you." And I go, I did put myself on tape for Saving Private Ryan. I ended up gone into a casting office, done a recording, and they'd, and he goes, "No, I didn't see that." He goes, what do I know you from? And I said, "Oh, I was in a movie called Courage Under Fire." And he goes, "That's what I know you from." And I found out later when I was working with him that he had seen that movie and said, "That's exactly the kind of person I want to play Private Ryan. He's just too skinny." And I had lost, 40 pounds to play that part. I was playing a heroin addict. And so it was this chance meeting that Robin had facilitated that it was,
Wow.
changed my life yet again.
I've never heard that before. That's really interesting. That's amazing how it just right place, right time, right weight, right thing.
Yeah.
It's just it all works out. Well, speaking of the money and $1 million and what it does to people, let's talk about The Rip.
How much was the tip that came in?
300 grand.
That's a $20 million rip.
It'd be so much easier if we just stole this money. I swear to God.
You should just take whatever money you want and walk away before this goes really bad for all of us.
No one needs to die tonight. You have 30 minutes to get out of that house.
So Joe Carnahan being Joe Carnahan, right? Pulling high octane. Dude,
Right.
From the second it starts, you are just in it. I have to say, selfishly, love seeing you guys in your like cop vest, Velcro, cop. Like it's
Right.
just it's a little bit of joy that I needed in the world right now to see Matt and Ben together again. So. Other than just the joy that you bring to people being together, what made you kind of want to do this film?
Well, the script, Joe sent us the script, and we've known Joe forever. We were big fans of Narc when it came around.
Narc is so good.
Yeah, and that's how we kind of got introduced to
Yeah.
Joe. And then Ben did Smoking Aces with him. We've been in touch with him over the years. And then he sent this script in. We read it and thought it was great and bought it for the company, which was exciting. And they, all right, Joe, we're going to do it. And we had meetings and, all right, you're going to direct it. And then we got to kind of casting discussions. And he said, well, I want you guys to do it if, you would be my kind of, and then we hadn't considered doing that. And then we thought about it and we were like, this would be kind of a great, and it's about two old friends who's kind of, suddenly it's kind of a subversion of that friendship. Suddenly they can't trust each other. And we thought, well, that'd be a good use of, people know us as friends. And so we kind of carry that baggage into the roles. And that's kind of how it came to be.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we're not going to give any spoilers, but I really enjoyed like who's lying? Where are we here with
Well,
this?
that's what the script was like. You're just going, I don't know who's doing what, and it's all these people with different agendas, and that was kind of the fun of it, and a lot for actors to play, which is what helped us get such a great supporting cast. Like
Yeah,
the
it's
ensemble
amazing.
is just, Teyana Taylor and Stephen Yeun and Catalina and Sasha and Kyle Chandler. Like it's a really, really.
They're all great, and this is based on a true story, which is interesting. I didn't know. I didn't know that in Miami you have to count the money on the site, which just seems kind of counterintuitive.
It's so one of Joe's best friends is the guy who led this team. They're called the Tactical Narcotics Team, and led them. And they basically they did this thing in Miami where they said, if you know about illegal money, like money that's from drugs or weapons or and we seize it and you've given us the tip, you get a piece of the seizure. And so suddenly all these tips started flowing in, and these teams would go. And, they have a dog, and the dog actually smells money. It's which is, that was a kind of cool little detail. And there was this story of them going to this house, and the dog alerted, like the dog alerts by peeing. So the dog goes and pees in an area, and they go, okay, there's money behind the wall here. And they pulled up to this house, and this dog just started alerting across the house. And they were going, what is inside this house? And they thought it was going to be, I don't know, 75 grand or something. And, and they got in there, and there was over $20 million in the walls of the house. And so that was kind of, Joe goes, okay, well, that's a cool place to start, as a jumping off point for the movie. So he kind of wove in, there's the rumblings of corruption within, maybe there's a bad member of the team and we don't know, and something's fishy, and now they stumble on this money and they have to count it on site, knowing that it's probably cartel money and people are going to come for it. And so... And then you don't know, you kind of, then the officers, the cops are put in this, in a room with all this money, and they've got mortgages, and they're real people. So it's like, it's a great kind of setup for.
Yeah, well, what would happen if just even $1,000 went missing? It's such a different.
It's a whole
really,
IA investigation. It's a whole thing, and so they're which is another, to kind of go into these jobs. And Catalina's character says it at one point, like, I get 80 grand a year after taxes, and I get shot at, I get spit on, I get, and it's, and your own department doesn't trust you, So yeah, it's about what, basically how strong is your kind of ethical framework and
Yeah.
and who can you trust? Yeah.
Great entertainment. You and Ben both got to flex your Spanish.
Yeah, his has gotten much better than mine, actually. We were at about the same level for about 25 years, and during COVID, he started taking kind of intensive classes, and I didn't know, when we did the movie Air, we were doing a press junket, we were sitting next to each other, and like Univision or one of the Telemundo came in and asked a question in Spanish, and I was about to answer, and he just ripped into a monologue in Spanish, and I looked at him like, what? Like, when did this happen? Like, but he really kind of used that time to, do something productive.
When did you learn Spanish? As a kid?
Yeah, when I was 15, 16, and 17, my mom took me to Mexico, 15 and 16, to Cuernavaca, and there was a language school there, and we lived with a family for a couple weeks in the summer. Went to school in the day and then lived with the family at night, and the family spoke no English, so you had to force you to try to communicate in Spanish. And then the 88, that when I was 17, we went to Guatemala and did that in Antigua. And so so that was where I basically the foundation for all my Spanish came from. But I haven't used it enough. in the intervening years. So
Wow, Ben, just letting it rip.
I know.
Oh my God. All right, you've described this experience for you as just like pure bliss, right? So, what is like kind of the best day on set for you, and what is a bad day on set for you? Like, were there any like tougher moments or moments where you're just like,
Tougher days for me are on kind of bigger, an action movie where you're waiting around a lot. Like that is that just gets, if you string together enough weeks in a row of doing that, then it starts to feel like a job.
the old hurry up and wait?
Yeah. If there's not enough to do,
Will you travel with your kids, or do they come with you now, or are they too old to like?
They're older now. So on the Odyssey, what was unique about that experience was it was the first time. So we've had this 2-week rule since I've been with Lucy.
It's been a long time now, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
I mean,
23 years.
I was just going to say, it's got to be over
yeah.
20 years.
Yeah, and once when I met her, she had a 4-year-old, and who's now 27, and then a few years later we had Isabella, who's now 19, but we established this 2-week rule, like no matter what, we're not apart, more than 2 weeks, and then when the kids were little and kind of portable, we just it was always a family adventure. We just went and set up camp wherever we were, and did it that way. And then depending on the movie or the length of time, we would finesse it however we had to finesse it. But this was the first time that I ever I was gone for 6 months. So the kids came over a few times, but it was still more than we ever had been apart.
Yeah, and they're growing up. I mean,
Yeah, they have their own lives, it turns out.
you're the ultimate girl dad,
Yeah.
right? 4 girls.
4 girls, yeah. I grew up with just a big brother, and so it was like I got a window into an entirely new universe in my 30s. So it's been great.
That segues perfect into the questions that I always ask my guests on the podcast. And the first one is about birth order. How has your birth order informed who you are as a person?
I've thought about this a lot because my wife is the oldest of 3, and I'm the youngest of 2. I really think that's one of the reasons we work so well, because I think as a youngest, and you can tell me if this has been your experience, it certainly has been mine, I'm extremely adaptable. I have no need to be in charge. And like I remember, as a kid, my brother's girlfriend was on the YWCA swim team. And so my brother joined the YWA swim team, right, as the only boy. And I had to join the YWCA swim team.
Okay.
Because my mom, is a professor. She was, single mom. My dad they were divorced, but my dad had us like every other weekend and one day a week. So my mom had to figure out what to do with us after school. So I was just on the swim team with my brother. Like she just kept us together on the swim team. And it didn't strike me at the time that this was some kind of unfairness or injustice, that I didn't want to be on the swim team. I just did it, and I think I'm that way. I think it's been, my career, your career as an actor, you're living out of a duffel bag for the whole first part of your career. And you're in this Best Western hotel, and you're in the, and you kind of live in the production, which is always a little chaotic. And I never really had a problem with it. It seemed like, yep, well, that's what I have to do. But I think Lucy and I really gel together really well, because she's 5 years younger than me, but she just takes on the role that kind of naturally takes on that kind of leadership role. Then I'm completely fine with it. I'm like, we bought our house in LA years ago, and we were living in New York, and we had talked about moving to LA, and we were going out because I was going to shoot Behind the Candelabra in LA. And so we needed to rent a house for the summer. And she went out to find the rental and saw a house for sale that was on the same street that Ben lived on, and called me and said, there's this house in it, and I love it. And Ben came down and looked at it. And so I had kind of my 2 favorite people on the phone, and Ben was like, you should get this place. And Lucy said, I love this place. And I was just like, okay. Like we bought it, and I'd never seen the house, but I knew, like, if they love it, I'm sure it's great. And if she loves it and she's going to be happy, I know I'm going to be happy. I know it's nicer than some of the hotels I've stayed in, you know, while I'm shooting. So like, this is going to be totally fine. And it was. And we lived there for 9 years.
That's amazing. And now they run your company basically, right?
Yeah, and she's
Artist
now
Equity?
well, actually, yeah. When I was Artist Equity,
Yeah.
and actually when I was, we're the three partners in the company, and when I was shooting, you know, another thing that was unique about that Odyssey experience is, and for my kids, was when I was shooting that, Ben was shooting this movie called Animals. It's great. It's going to come out on Netflix later in the year. It's a great movie, and Lucy produced it, and so she left to go to LA. I left to go to Europe, and we had to have somebody stay with the kids. Luckily, it happened over the spring break time, so there was like a week on one side of spring break. Then spring break happened, and they could come, you know, and then there was a week on the other side. So it worked out, but we both went in kind of separate directions for, you know, but there were these incredible kind of dream come true opportunities for each of us, and the kids were like incredibly supportive of that. So
Do you see some of these attributes in your own daughters, like oldest, youngest?
yeah, I mean, I definitely see that the effect of birth order, but also just, I don't know if it's been I really, kids come out as who they are. And I don't think I appreciated that until I had kids. Like,
Absolutely.
you really see that, you know.
And so I joke I could take all the natal vitamins, I can do all the things, and these kids come out hardwired.
They really are hardwired.
It's amazing.
Their spirits
Yeah.
are, you know.
Totally.
That is what makes me believe that there is something else,
Yeah.
right? Is it really does. Like, I also had that, you know, I experienced when my father passed away of seeing that happen before my eyes and then instantly not recognizing him. And it was me and my brother. And if you had given me 100 chances at a line of dialogue and I'd write professionally, I never would have gotten it right. I said, Kyle, have you ever seen this man before? And he said, I've never seen that man in my life. And so it really made me appreciate that idea that, you know, they say namaste, and what that means, it means the light in me sees the light in you, right? That really, in a very deep way, kind of brought that home. Like, oh, I get it. Like, and that's what I see with my kids when they come, you know, it's like you see who they are from the second you look at them.
Wow, I never thought of that. I lost both my parents on a while ago, but I've never thought about that looking completely different. That's just the way in which you just articulated that.
It was like he was replaced in the blink of an eye by some old man from Central Casting that just was there. And, you know, they said at the play, they said, you know, people like to stay with the body, and my brother and I were like, we're good. You know, we'd been there for, you know, 48 straight hours, and we were like, we don't ever want to see this place again.
Right.
Like, see you later. Like, he's not here, you know.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, my other question, JOMO. All right, so joy of missing out.
I haven't heard this.
The kids use this phrase. It's like the
JOMO.
opposite of FOMO.
All right.
So the joy of missing out, for me, really clear. IKEA, no thanks. Happy to miss that. Happy to miss a cruise. No thanks.
I'm with you, and we're two for two so far.
Some of them were fun. My favorite was Joel Edgerton, who's great in Train Dreams.
Great. And I
he's
love Joel, and he is incredibly talented across a number of different disciplines. That, you know, he's amazing.
Yes, and it was such a treat because his was my favorite thus far. So Matt, the ante's up is kids parties. So I ask you, what is your JOMO?
Award season,
Yeah,
100%.
but you like being nominated, right?
What I don't like is this idea of campaigning.
Right.
It seems completely backwards to me. It's just odd.
It's the industry that fuels the industry, and vice versa. It's very cyclical.
And maybe it's good for movies, just having it all out in the, you know, and it just gets the culture thinking and talking about movies. I hope that's the case.
Well, now everything is so different than when we were coming up. Now everything's on social media.
Yeah.
You see images, you see the thing, and it makes you think, and there's conversation around that. And maybe that's like, oh, I'm going to watch that movie now. I've seen all the stuff, and I really want to watch it. Where
There's
maybe
certainly,
otherwise you wouldn't. So.
yeah. There's certainly something to be said for kind of getting that kind of penetration into people's,
There's so much
consciousness
noise now
about it because
that-
there's so much noise.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So this is my last question, and it's about core memory. So is there one memory, whether it's old or new, that you go back to time and time again that was really a turning point for you, either in your marriage or your children or your career or family, any aspect of your life?
I do think that this last experience of the Odyssey I'm still kind of unpacking it, but it did have a profound effect on me because I felt, because if I look objectively at what was required to do that job, I think it came at just the right time in my life. I think I would have been miserable 20 years ago trying to do that job. Like I didn't, because you were uncomfortable every day. But I really enjoyed, like deeply enjoyed every minute of it. Like it was, and it really had that it's like intellectually I understood that concept of you're not in control of what happens, but you are in control of how you feel about it. It's kind of easier said than done. But to really feel gratitude, and I think because it was tied into not only the joy in being able to have a role that great with a director that great with a group of people that great in a story that great, but in that sense of nostalgia I had for how I started, how I came into the business, the feeling I had when I was shooting School Ties, and Freddie Francis was the cinematographer, and I was like, this is really happening. Back to like the very first feature, like the one line I had in Mystic Pizza. It was like 3 nights of shooting this dinner table scene because there was a lot of coverage in the scene. And I just remember being elated for like 3 straight nights. Just completely joyful. Doing the Odyssey this last year, it felt like my one chance in my life to make a David Lean movie. That I was making the last big movie on film that I was ever going to get to make. And it's so funny to think that it really is all in how you look at it. Like, yeah, I was wet and I was cold and I was hungry and all that happened. But there was a guy who works with Chris on a lot of his movies who was a Navy SEAL named Duffy. And Duffy said to me towards the end of the film, because those guys, like, to become that, there is a lot of discomfort you have to experience and tolerate. Almost nobody can do it. A very, very tiny percentage of human beings can even do it. And he said to me towards the end of the movie, he goes, you never remember how cold you were. You never remember how, it's like, that's not the memory that you have. That's a fleeting feeling and it's going to pass. And you're going to be warm again. You're just not warm now, and so get comfortable in the discomfort. Just see it for what it is. It's not forever.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And okay, so one more, Ocean's 14, right? Okay.
I keep hearing
Can't
about
wait.
this, but
I keep hearing about it.
We have to get a script. We have to get, there's a lot of ducks we have to get in a row. I mean, I do know that everybody would love to do it. The group of people would love to get back together. And
I so want Ben cameo. I mean, Casey.
So does he.
Right?
He's like, I've been trying to get in these movies. He goes, how many of these have you done?
Yeah. We can work him in some
Maybe
way.
we can put him in a cameo as Ben Affleck in a casino somewhere playing
Come on,
poker.
the guy can count cards.
He
Man, I don't
counts
know.
cards,
Can we say that? I guess it's illegal, right?
No, it's
But
not illegal.
It's not?
No,
Okay.
counting cards is totally legal. They're just allowed you to ban you from playing blackjack, which they have with Ben. Because he's a hell of a card player.
Matt, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming in and love the rip. It's so fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. Appreciate it.